Well, I hate to break it to you, but executive orders do not trump laws passed by Congress. Sure, when it's convenient, the President and Congress will often treat executive orders as if they are laws passed by legitimate constitutional processes instead of yet another president trying to get as much power as possible with no regard for the Constitution and the rule of law. But I just don't think that's going to happen in this case. The supposedly pro-life Democrats were damned if they voted for the bill because, again, it funds abortion. But damned if they didn't vote for the bill because of all the sheep in the Democratic base who think they're going to get free goodies from this bill. But they couldn't get that political cover by putting language in the bill that will prevent it from covering abortions, because doing so will get pro-abortion Democrats in trouble with their campaign contributors in the abortion industry. So President Obama came to the rescue by writing an executive order all these politicians know he has no intention whatsoever of enforcing. So the supposedly pro-life Democrats could get a get-out-of-jail-free card to vote for a bill they know covers abortion while keeping Planned Parenthood happy by keeping the death money flowing. Now, even if executive orders weren't separation of powers violating unconstitutional garbage, Obama clearly cannot be trusted to actually enforce such an order. Now, during his presidential campaign, Obama has received well over $6,906,664 in campaign contributions from pro-abortion groups. And his public actions and statements show it. I mean, here is a response he made to a simple question he was asked about when human rights should begin for a baby. Let's see if I can find it.
At what point does a baby get human rights, in your view?
Well, I think that whether you're looking at it from a theological perspective or a scientific perspective, answering that question with specificity, is above my pay grade.
So it's basically above his pay grade to ask a simple question. I mean, his position is so extreme, he even shares the twisted view advanced by the likes of Adolf Hitler wannabe Peter Singer, that newborn babies, even newborn babies, don't even have the right to life. And when he was in the Illinois State Senate, he voted multiple times against the Born Alive Infant Protection Act, which would have protected babies who survived failed abortion attempts and outlawed the practice of live birth abortions, which are in the state of Illinois, which is where babies are fully delivered. Babies are fully delivered. They're already born, and then they're left to die or are murdered on the spot. I mean, here's him making an excuse for that deplorable vote.
I suspect that doctors feel that they would be under that obligation, that they would already be making these determinations, and that essentially adding an additional doctor who then has to be called in an emergency situation to come in and make these assessments is really designed simply to burden the original decision of the woman and the physician to induce labor and perform an abortion.
He even admitted that the supposed abortion he described is induce labor and then perform an abortion. Basically, that the baby's born and then killed. Oh, but some of you will assure me that the Hyde Amendment doesn't allow the funding of abortion. Well, here's news on the Hyde Amendment. The Hyde Amendment is what's called a rider to a bill. Basically, the Hyde Amendment is passed in the annual appropriations of Health and Human Services departments. Usually it passes, but it only applies to the Medicaid and Medicare programs, and it doesn't apply to funding to quote, family planning organizations like Planned Parenthood. So that's another example of the Washington double talk I was talking about. Now, before I continue my analysis on this bill, I'm going to take some calls. Now, if you want to call into the show, my number is 646-644-7225. 646-378-1514. Once again, my number is 646-378-1514. One last time, my number is 646-378-1514. Now let's see if I've got any callers today. Not yet, but this broadcast is still young. Okay, let's continue to break down this bill. Now, contrary to the lies told by Obama and the other politicians that voted for and supported this abomination, yes, it does force you, the public, to buy health insurance from the same health insurance companies that have been ripping us off. It does so by amending the 1986 IRS Code by adding the following chapter, Chapter 48, Maintenance of Minimum Essential Coverage. It's described on page 127 of the bill. Quote, requirement to maintain minimum essential coverage. An applicable individual shall, for each month beginning after 2013, ensure that the individual and any dependent of the individual who is an applicable individual is covered under minimum essential coverage for such month. You can't get any clearer than that, folks. But wait, it gets worse. This section of the bill also gives the IRS sweeping new powers to act as judge, jury, and executioner if anybody refuses to pay protection money to the health insurance mafia under what is called a shared responsibility payment, which will go into effect if, quote, if an applicable individual fails to meet the requirement of subsection A for one or more months during any calendar year beginning after 2013. There is hereby imposed a penalty with respect to the individual in the amount determined under subsection C. That penalty will be no more than $750 per person who does not have health insurance, up to a maximum of $2,250 per household, or 2% of household income, whichever is greater. And the bill continues on to say that, quote, any penalty imposed by this section with respect to any month shall be included with a taxpayer's return under Chapter 1 for the taxable year which includes such month. So under this bill, the IRS would have access to all of your private medical records for any reason. No judge, no jury. No, ladies and gentlemen, if this wasn't an act of government, it would be called extortion. But wait, that's not all, folks. The IRS is going to screw you even more in this bill. This bill will also have a tax on employer-sponsored health care plans that provide what it defines as a, quote, excessive benefit, which it defines on page 730 of the bill as, quote, any applicable employer-sponsored coverage made available by an employer to an employee during any taxable period. I repeat, quote, excess benefit according to this health care bill, as defined on page 730 of this bill, is, quote, any applicable employer-sponsored coverage made available to an employer during any taxable period. So in other words, if you get insurance through your employer and it covers even slightly more than jack diddly squat, then your plan will be taxed. And say sayonara to financial privacy, as the bill also gives the government real-time access to your bank account with no judge, no jury, and no probable cause by amending the Social Security Act with the following subsection 1173. It's described in page 59 of the bill. It says the following. In general, the Secretary, referring to the Secretary of Health and Human Services, shall adopt standards for transactions and data elements in such transactions to enable health information to be exchanged electronically that are appropriate for A, the financial and administrative transactions described in paragraph 2. B, other financial and administrative transactions determined appropriate by the Secretary, consistent with the goals of improving the operation of the healthcare system,